Team IAS Network. So today we start a discussion on General Studies Paper 4 Ethics. General Studies Paper 4 Ethics contains two units, the conceptual part and the theory part, which is getting a standard 130 marks, case studies 120 marks. So ethics, before we go into today's question, the part A of the paper for 130 marks consists of the fundamental concepts like attitude, aptitude, emotional intelligence, transparency, accountability, then the contributions of thinkers from India and abroad. So, and the part B consists of case studies related to the concepts. Today we do the 2019 paper. I've taken one question from the theory part and one case study. First question, what do you understand by the term public servant? Reflect on the expected role of a civil servant for 150 marks. Now, civil service, details regarding civil service. The chapter on civil service is covered in public administration paper 1, paper 2. A bit of it is covered in general studies paper 2, role of the civil service. Then again in political science and international relations, paper 1, section A, we have the topic civil service. So this particular topic is common to the optional public administration, there where you read in detail. Then in general studies paper 2, role of civil service. Now with this background we go into the question, definition of a civil servant. Expected role of a civil servant, 150 words. First important definition of a civil servant. A civil servant has permanency of tenure. By this I mean he is a part of the permanent executive. Permanent executive, they are recruited after a rigorous competitive examination, then a period of training, that is called the probationary period, then they are confirmed. So until the civil servant leaves voluntarily or unless he is removed, he enjoys permanency of tenure. This is a contrast to the political executive, that is the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, who enjoy a fixed term of 5 years. The civil service has got permanency in tenure. The second important definition of a civil servant I would mean regular remuneration. By this I mean he is paid for the services he renders to the government. So there is a fixed pay scale structure which improves as the civil servant goes up the ladder, provision for an increment and other perquisites. So regular remuneration. The third definition would be training for skill development. So the civil servant, with whatever knowledge, with whatever attributes he has, he enters the civil service. Then the civil servant is given a lot of training to equip him for the job. This is training for skill development. So by definition of a civil servant, I include three aspects: permanency of tenure, regular remuneration, training. These three are the characteristics or components for the definition of a civil servant. Now, what is the expected role of a civil servant? First, implementing the policies of the government. Now, the civil service is a part of the permanent executive. So, what does the permanent executive do? It implements the policies of the government. The government lays down the policies. Implementation is done by the civil service. The second expected role of the civil servant is upholding the rule of law. By rule of law, we have seen Article 14, equality before law, equal protection of the law. So when upholding the rule of law, the civil servant goes by the dictum that everybody has to be served alike, whether he is a poor farmer or whether he is an ex-bureaucrat, whoever it is. Upholding the rule of law. Third, service delivery. How the civil servant is expected to be prompt in service delivery. Now the government has taken up so many programs for the vulnerable groups like the SC, ST, OBC, women, differently abled senior citizens. Now the programs for them have to be structured in such a way that the beneficiary benefits from the programs. How effective is service delivery depends again on the role of the civil servant. Impartiality. By impartiality, I mean again, when discharging his functions, he is supposed to be impartial. He should not take sides in an issue, he should be impartial. Anonymity. By anonymity, I mean the civil service works from the background. Any credit goes to the minister. So, by being anonymous, he is the he works from the background. Commitment. By commitment, I mean commitment to the programs of the government, not commitment to any political party. Integrity, that is working, and by integrity, I mean absence of corruption. He discharges his duties in a free atmosphere, corruption-free atmosphere, and not only should he be not corrupt, he should see that the subordinates also work in such an atmosphere. So integrity is one of the hallmarks of the civil service, and this is an expected role of a civil servant. So for 150 words, again we sum up the first question. By definition of a civil servant, I meant permanency of tenure, regular remuneration, training for the job. Then what is the policy, what is the expected role of a civil servant? First, policy implementation. Policy formulation is the role of the political executive. Policy implementation is the role of the civil service. He upholds the rule of law, that is treating everybody alike in consonance with Article 14, which speaks of equality before law, equal protection of the law. Prompt service delivery to the vulnerable groups, efficient service delivery, impartiality in working, anonymity, not aligning with any political party but being in the background, commitment to the progressive policies of the government, not commitment to any political party, commitment to his work, integrity, all his actions should show that he is above corruption. Not only should the civil servant be of sound integrity, he should also see that his subordinates also practice integrity at the workplace. This is question number 1. Case studies. We take up a case study for discussion for 250 words. In a modern democracy, the political executive frames policy and the permanent executive executes. The initial mutual trust understanding, which was prevalent in the decades after independence, has now resulted in politicization of the bureaucracy. What are the consequences of such politicization? So you understand this case study properly. So what I'm trying to get from the answer is, see, in the initial stages, basically the political executive, that is the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers at the center, Chief Minister and Council of Ministers in the state, frame policy. Implementation of policy is by the civil service. See, initially the Lakshman Rekha was clearly demarcated. So the political executive never used to interfere in the working of the civil service. Of late, there are a lot of misunderstandings, and the politicians want to interfere in all aspects of the functioning of the civil service, which has resulted in politicization of the bureaucracy. What are the consequences? So this answer for case study would stress only on the consequences, nothing else. Consequences of the politicization of bureaucracy. See the first one, first consequence. When the bureaucracy is politicized, the civil servant develops political lineages. So he will aspire to develop political contacts. Why does he develop political contacts? To help him in his career. A plum transfer, a good posting, then to help him in promotions. So political leanings is the first consequence of politicization. When I say developing political leanings, what is happening is, of late we see the civil service hankering for plum postings, and unless and once he gets the support of the minister for a good posting, there is a quid pro quo. He'll have to help the minister in all illegal dealings. Then he becomes a part of the politician criminal business nexus. So first important consequence, the developing political leaning to ask the political element to help him for his transfer, promotion, etc. Second, now another thing what is happening is increasing materialism. So the civil servant sees a easy way of making a fast buck if he colludes with the political executive. So with the result, there is corruption, increase because the civil servant wants to make a fast buck before he leaves. So he will indulge in underhand dealings, and he will collude with the political element. This is the second consequence. Third consequence of politicization of bureaucracy, the impact on governance. The governance takes a back seat because what would happen is, when the criminal politician bureaucrat nexus is ruling, the honest civil servant cannot function. The service delivery takes the back door. So it has an impact on the governance. So the common perception would be whoever pays will get the service done. Bribery becomes institutionalized. So this will have a bad effect on the governance. Then once the bureaucracy is politicized, you see how they function at times of crisis. Now you take an example of a particular executive magistrate belonging to a particular district. He is posted in the place of his choice, though the standing government orders circulars say that a person cannot serve in the place of his birth. Now what would happen because of this politicization? And once this civil servant is posted in the place of his choice, you cannot expect him to be impartial. Say there are communal riots. How do you expect him to be impartial? He will obviously take sides, and he will go by the dictates of the political element, thereby functioning becomes biased. Policy paralysis. By policy paralysis, I mean, see now the civil service is expected to implement policy. In the absence of impartial functioning, in the absence of clear cut, like what shall I say, in the absence of integrity, in the absence of impartial functioning, what would happen is there is policy paralysis. Policies cannot be implemented properly. With the result, the vulnerable groups suffer, the common man suffers due to policy paralysis. Negative impact on society. By this I mean the politicization leads to a very bad impact on society. Like see certain organizations, when we mention their name, we know that they are the first thing that comes to your mind is corruption. You take the passport, you take the transport sector. So all this is linked to bribes, is linked to speed money. So all this is a negative impact on society. That is, society visualizes how in the absence of bribes, things cannot get moving. So this particular case study which we discussed, consequences of politicization of bureaucracy, once again, first would be the civil servant develops political lineages to benefit his career. He resorts to political influence for his transfers, promotions, to enable him to stay in one place. This indirectly promotes the politician criminal bureaucrat nexus, increasing materialism resulting in corruption. Impact on governance, how the civil servant cannot effectively deliver because of the he cannot effectively deliver because he has been brought by the political element, and he'll have to tutor the programs to benefit the clientele of the minister or the political element. So there is a biased functioning, there is impact on governance, and as I also mentioned, how the civil servant cannot be impartial in times of crisis. We gave the example of civil servant belonging to a particular district posted to his place of choice. Thereby, he cannot effectively discharge his function. Say, in a case of communal riots, he will obviously side with one party and act in favor of the other party. There is policy paralysis and the negative impact on society. These are the consequences of the politicization of bureaucracy. So, the answer has to be very specific. You may have read so much about the civil service, you may have read so much about the bureaucracy, but in the case study, you highlight only what is required in the answer. That way, the answer would become perfect.